Hello, welcome to our very first episode of season 3 of the IERLab Podcast. And why not start the very first episode with a very special edition indeed? Now, today we're diving into the world of child influences across Asia Pacific. I think we're getting a bit more broad as we go through the episodes, and you'll see that. Now, the issue brings together new studies exploring how young creators shape and are shaped by culture, politics, and also regulation. Now, from ethnographies to content analysis, each paper reveals how children navigate complex media ecosystems in their own social and national context. It is going to be a great season, so stick around for more and more episodes coming your way. Now, let's take a closer look today with Professor Crystal, the founding director of IERLab, a digital anthropologist as well as ethnographer and of vernacular internet cultures, and is a world-leading expert in the fields of influencer cultures, social media, pop cultures, and digital media in Asia Pacific region. Could I say any more? Hello, Professor Crystal, and welcome back.
Hello, Walter. You are so generous. I'm blushing. It's a great pleasure to be speaking with you again. Thank you for all the work that you do into researching us. It's always so wonderful to have such insightful questions from you.
Oh, thank you very much for being here. And as we have you at the end of the season 3 as well, and also the start of our season 4, we do have a season 4 coming up as well. So stay tuned for that. But we're going to get straight into it because there's so much to talk about, yet so little time. But let me start off with talking about children, of course. Now, when you and I were younger, Professor Crystal, we were not, I guess, when we had our part-time jobs, we weren't considered maybe part of the family's income, I would say. Maybe I would help my parents here and there with a few dollars if they needed it, but not like there are today. So let's talk about if children help earn money as part of family influencer accounts. How should we decide what counts as child labor online, and who should make that decision? I mean, it sounds like an easy question. Like, of course, most people go, well, of course, parents. But is it more in depth than that?
It is very tricky terrain indeed. You're absolutely right. So, depending on who you ask, the everyday person on the street may say that child labor is literally all forms of work performed by children.
Hmm.
But if you were to shift through the specificities, let's say think about the ways the International Labor Organization thinks about child labor. It often refers to some sort of deprivation of childhood.
Hmm.
It may impact children's dignity. It might harm them physically or mentally. It might be physically, socially, maybe even morally dangerous for
Hmm.
children to do this work. If we think about UNICEF, the ombudsman who's responsible for the safety and protection of children worldwide, they often think about child labor as anything that is hazardous, and it excludes what they think of as productive, helpful, light work, like
Hmm.
helping with household chores or taking a holiday job. But if
Hmm.
you were to pivot to the world of child influencers and family influencers, the discussions get a bit muddied. On social media, lots of audience members and users agree that child labor simply refers to any child who's appearing online and connected to some sort of monetizing activity. So, for instance, if I was a mummy blogger and I was reviewing nappies and
Hmm.
I put my childhood nappies in a photo to just demonstrate how great these nappies are, audiences have argued that I have therefore subjected my child involuntarily to child labor because I'm basically using them to earn money through my
Right.
advertorial. It is more clear-cut with family influencers and child influencers when the children are front and center of the camera and clearly the ones attracting eyeballs, the ones who are raking in millions of viewers and therefore millions of dollars. So the conversation has become very muddied because traditionally we think of child labor as being dangerous and hazardous. But on the online space, we're needing to think about them as sole income earners, the ones responsible for moving dollars and eyeballs,
Hmm.
and therefore paying more attention to the slippery slope of exploitation.
Let's continue with sort of like family talk about this as well. But not only that, religion, loyalty, tradition. So when child influencers show family values or religion or loyalty to traditions, how can we tell if it's real cultural expression? I mean, if you think about it before the whole of social media and online presence, like you could compare this kind of thing to, let's say, beauty pageants or something, where a parent would live through the child vicariously because it's something maybe they wanted to become when they were younger. Or it still happens like even in Korea with like let's say Miss Korea or models, etc. Well, how can we tell if it's a real culture expression or they're being used to push political or social ideas?
I often think the real answer to this is only the child themselves can tell. But children as young people are still developing cognitively, physiologically, psychologically. It's very ambiguous terrain because on the one hand, history has seen throngs of young children step up and represent specific ideals and goals. The most recent example being Swedish girl Greta Thunberg, who from
Hmm.
50 years old started protesting on a school strike for climate change. And that invoked a movement across the world of other young people under 18s to follow suit. At the same time, we've also seen very attentive and very lucid child actors, entertainers, performers from Hollywood and beyond who seem eloquent and able to represent their values and themselves. In this
Hmm.
collection of papers, though, we're seeing children on social media doing this. There's a slightly different terrain we're looking at because children on social media are not as protected as those in the mainstream entertainment industry, whether in Hollywood or ecologies like Korea. They don't nearly have the same types of managerial protections, guidelines, unions overseeing their well-being and welfare. And therefore, a lot of the onus of protecting the children falls onto the parents who are the default legal guardians.
Hmm.
In our collection of papers, we see these child influences sometimes being used to demonstrate the religious values, cultural, ethnic values, sometimes even values of different types of family units. And because of the editing, the posturing, it's so hard to say how much of this is the child being cognitively aware of what they're saying and doing, and how much of this is posturing and editing by the family, the guardian. The
Hmm.
real consideration here to be worried about is when children seem to be used as puppets to push for extreme ideology. Now, let me clarify what I mean here.
Hmm.
For the most part, if we look at history, there have long been popular shows like Kids Say the Darndest Things or Little
Hmm.
Big Shots, even the little segments in the now defunct Ellen show where children are brought on board for being viral on social media and they're interviewed about their thoughts and feelings about society in general.
Hmm.
And those are quite cute moments because children are really delving in and expressing themselves, no holds barred. We used to have that sort of culture on family YouTube accounts. But these days, as we're becoming more and more polished and with political agendas being pushed via influencers, we are hearing less and less of this innate childlike voicing and seeing children being part of an extensive repertoire of political messaging. So it's important to be able to discern when these are cute moments hearing from the child,
Hmm.
saying the honest things, versus when it's clearly them being part of a long trajectory of instrumentation of discourse.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned the Ellen Show because I remember, I don't know if you can remember, but there was on the Oprah show very, very long time ago, probably early 90s, there was a young preacher. And when I say young, he was probably about maybe around the age of 10, maybe even younger, preaching, I believe, what was passages from the Bible in one of those sort of very commanding ways. And
Mm,
when Oprah sat him down and said, "What did you just talk about?"
mm,
he could not explain in detail what he was talking about. And that was a very
mm.
clear indication that it was more of something that he was taught to do rather
Yeah.
than understood. And this is, I guess, somewhat related to these days as well, when now we have a larger platform, even though Oprah was probably one of the biggest platforms back then, but it's an even larger platform, and therefore it could, damage more and more people as society builds. But let's keep to the subject of sort of moral, cultural, and social messages online. So when children are used to promote those moral, cultural, or social messages online, how as individuals or how as parents or anyone can we make sure their own choices are respected while adults guide their content?
Well, there are different types of genres where children are introduced on social media. I quite enjoy the street interview genre where children are just asked for their thoughts and opinions without any further posturing or provocation of how to shape the direction they're going in. Many YouTube channels, including those coming out of Korea, like ODG,
Hmm.
do that very well, where it's a moment where children get to express their childlikeness and their thoughts, perhaps ask an adult some of the silliest questions they've always thought about but have been afraid to ask. Now, these platform children, their concerns and their thoughts about society in ways that give them visibility. I remember during the pandemic, there were a series of these where adults were asking children, what do you feel now that mom and dad seem to be working from home a lot? What do
Hmm.
you think about all the masks you see on street? And it's important to hear from the perspectives of children in these ways, and then share them on social media so that we're all aware to pay heed to the youngest members of society. However, there's also different genres where children, as you say, are literally used as a cast of actors to perform scripts, where children are pranked for laughs. And these ones do not respect their agency as much.
Hmm.
It reduces children to mere props because they do not yet have the cognitive or psychological ability to make decisions, or maybe even the agency and ability to make decisions over what they want to do or not.
Hmm.
I think the best thing we can do as people outside of the child influencer units and outside of the influencer industry is to sign off or endorse or refute things with our attention.
Hmm.
Something is not right, rather than circulate it and cause it to go even more viral, we should disendorse it by not recommending it, reporting it,
Hmm.
refusing to give it attention, suffocating it basically, so that we're not really feeding the attention economy and not really giving incentive to people who are producing more and more of these contents. That's the best thing we can do as viewers. Now, as guardians or parents of children, we should sit them down and talk them through the different options that they're going through on social media. When are pranks good fun and family oriented within the milieu of your household? When do they cross the line when they seem to be just for a YouTube recording to be spectated and laughed at by others?
Hmm.
Does it seem friendly and okay when the child seems to take it in good light and they're not harmed? When does it seem not okay when the child is clearly affected by this borderline abuse? So it's important to teach our children what it's okay to laugh with, what
Hmm.
it's not okay to laugh at, and
Hmm.
also shape their perceptions of humor to not be at the expense of others. Because increasingly, a lot of child influencer contents targeting other children are pivoting on the genre of pranks, humor, and borderline comedy that can be contentious as well.
I definitely agree with that, especially with what children are exposed to. Saying that, like when I was a young child, I was exposed to TV shows like Jackass or something like that, and now there's a lot of that content online. It's interesting
Yeah.
that you mentioned like ODG because I used to watch that quite religiously. And one
Mm.
of the occurring students called, I think his name is Horang, he was telling about his experiences as being sort of a micro celebrity in Korea because these ODG videos they do go viral because they get the
Yeah.
big names on. They went from nothing into the probably one of the biggest platforms in Korea, and they have idols coming on, which is obviously great clickbait for anyone who's
Mm.
a K-pop fan. They have actors coming on. They have all the big people coming on, which is just going to reach more and more. But these kids are also becoming massive. I remember there was this one interview with Horang, and he's one of the biggest actors in in Korea, and when they compared how many views Horan got to this actor, this kid had millions upon millions of more views than this one actor.
Yeah, well, children are definitely very attractive clickbait. Specifically, I've written about them in other scholarly papers as cute bait. We like
Hmm.
seeing children, their reactions, their frustrations, because they're not yet as cynical as adults in society, and they
Hmm.
seem to portray emotions more transparently in their face. In the influencer space, this might mean that it may have once made sense for, say, influencer moms to use their kids to review nappies. But
Hmm.
increasingly, we're also seeing the insertion of child influencers into very absurd situations. For instance, influencers selling or promoting fried food or
Yeah.
fast food, and then having the child hold like a bucket of chicken or a
Hmm.
hamburger. And there's no correlation at all to the
Hmm.
child bucket. I've even seen ads where moms have been subjecting their children to beauty routines in the bathroom. So adultification very early on,
Hmm.
but then having the child handle things like a razor, a tampon, an
Oh.
eyelash curler. You
Hmm.
know, people are interested in it because it's fun to see the child's reaction, but it's not age appropriate. And really, there is no connection between the product and the sponsored message to that demographic. So this is where you can see children clearly being used as cute bait for eyeballs,
Hmm.
but as respecting the agency of children and having them allowed a voice and a presence, whether in the entertainment industry or in social media visibilities.
Well, this sort of brings me on to my last question, and I guess this is a question, this is the million-dollar question, to be honest with you. Many people think about it. We are building on regulations, rules and regulations. I know that Korea recently, I think it was last year or this year that they passed that you have to be over a certain age, or there's like an age appropriate for using social media. There are restrictions for young social media users, but with these weak rules and oversight, who should be responsible for keeping child influencers safe? Now, most people will go, it's the parents, but is it also social media platforms? Is it that easy? Is it regulators? Is it agencies that hire them? Is it the children themselves? In your opinion, what can we do to keep our children safe?
So the short million-dollar answer is everyone has something to do.
Mm-hmm.
The long, well-researched million-dollar answer is that there are specific stakeholders who need to oversee specific things.
Mm.
Now, given the example of Korea that you mentioned, there is a minimum age for children to have their own social media accounts. It's usually about 14 years old for most
Mm.
social media. And then the newer regulations state that the younger teens, so those 14 to 18, should have a restricted usage or a restricted mode turned on at nighttime when they're meant to be sleeping, like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Yeah.
There are also recommendations that there should be daily time limits, that the accounts should be private by default. And governments have mandated in Korea and around the world that platforms can only collect a very, very streamlined and absolutely necessary specific set of personal information if needed for them to perform on the app. These children should not be used for targeted commercial advertising. So
Hmm.
that tells you how, if we were to roll out keeping children safe, platforms would be the most efficient because they are the gatekeepers. They're
Hmm.
basically where all the children are, where all the brands flock to promote to children or to use influencers to promote products targeted at children.
Hmm.
That said, platforms are not universal. We tend to say things like, oh, let TikTok regulate, let Instagram regulate. But we have to understand that around the world, we all have different mores, values, and thresholds,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to something like children well-being and welfare. So platforms can do their best in terms of limitations for universality. Things that we generally agree worldwide are harmful to children or good
Hmm.
for children, they can implement and roll out in the community guidelines. But the
Excellent.
next stage we need to look at then is governments and their ministries, departments, and regulators. Here is where we get to pay attention to national or cultural nuances. Governments may impose stricter limits for their own citizens, or impose stricter guidelines for some social media platforms to operate within their jurisdiction. This is really helpful because as legal citizens of a country, technically the government has responsibility for the children in the nation. Technically, as citizens, we should also have the right to feel protected by our governments. So that's the second tier. The third tier is, of course, parents, guardians. But the problem here is that even the most well-meaning parents, the most loving guardians, may not have the know-how, the training, and the expertise to navigate the social media industry. It is not tacit. It's not learned overnight the moment you become a parent. Social media is a very tricky terrain. It involves knowing your rights, reading contracts, knowing social media features, knowing what types of contents may violate guidelines, may influence the actor, the child, the ward you're looking after. So I think what is needed here is also the consideration that parents of child influencers or legal guardians of children and family units need to have proper training. And here is where we look at the fourth stakeholder, industry. By default, the best interlocutors in industry are your influencer managers, your creator partnership liaisons, whose jobs are to go and contact these parents and talents and make sure they've got everything they need, presumably for a cut, of course, of the income or the profit in the long chain of profits. But they're here to help lubricate understandings of the industry and provide that kind of training and expertise. Some platforms have been doing that well. For instance, in Korea, I'm aware that TikTok has been quite active in producing resources directly for their creators without needing to go through the middlemen of agencies. Here in Australia, we certainly have young people involved in policy conversations with Meta as well as in TikTok in order for them to share their views on what they want. So who should be responsible? If we go through the list, it would be platforms, governments, guardians and parents, and an industry. How should we be responsible? Well, the yardsticks for child well-being are shifting every day because the harms and the availability of all the different tenuous ways children can be exploited are also multiplying. So it's important to be updated, to keep reading, to be attuned with what's trending, and then to triangulate with best practices within the country and with your regional neighbors who might share similar values to your culture and society.
That was obviously the best answer that we could have. I learned a lot from that. And especially as a person who, I mean, we're both parents in the hopefully not near future, that we will have to start. I'm hoping by the time my daughter at least gets to the age that there are some, solid regulations and rules that are, I don't think you can be completely, there are ways to get around these things, but at least there are some ways that I know that I can put my daughter onto social media because I mean it's such a part of life now that there's no point avoiding it. But I can let her, upload something or be a part of something where she's in a safe environment because now it's before social media times it was going outside, but now you don't even have to go outside to be in danger. But thank you so much again, Professor Crystal, for today's talk. But we do have you on towards the end of this season. But before we go, is there anything you'd like to promote? Example, your future studies, current works, or we're going to have you back soon. But is there anything that you'd like to promote?
I think I've got one piece of advice to parents and guardians in general, and then a resource I'd like to share. As a millennial parent of very young children, I always have conversations with friends, and we lament how, in addition to all the challenges of parenting, these days we also need to go before our children to explore the digital terrain. You know how we wouldn't give our child a food item before we have first tasted it, to check temperature and taste. I wouldn't give any of my children any books or literature without first reading it and making sure there is no age inappropriate contents. So in the same way, when they do eventually get onto games, consoles, and social media when they get older, I want to be there before them to check out the space and then bring them on board there so that we can experience it together. It's really additional work for parents, and it helps that we can do it together, help each other out, educate each other along the way. Now, as a side, I do have a new book that just came out last week. It's titled Child Influences: How Children Become Entangled with Social Media Fame. And it catalogs the history of how children became extremely online, internet famous, and then million-dollar income earning types of celebrity. It doesn't particularly promote this as a practice. It rather accepts that it's inevitable in this day and age, and so helps us to think about all the different categorizations of child influences, the stakeholders, the risks, and the pitfalls, and then helps us to think through what we need to be prepared for as this becomes more mainstream.
Okay, that's actually the first part you did there was excellent advice. And though it is additional work for parents, any parent out there though who really cares for their child and their child's well-being, I'm sure shouldn't see that as an extra step, more the fact that that should be the baseline of anything these days. But thank you very much again, Professor Crystal. And I'd like to thank our listeners today for the episode, the first episode of season 3 of the IERLab podcast. Once again, thank you to today's special guest, Professor Crystal.
Thank you for having me.
And until next time, this has been Walter Lee. You may click on your next adventure now.